We're standing here with Megan Griffith, the director of The Off Hours. Um, the film sets in a diner in the middle of nowhere and it feels very authentic. Is there like a real place that you were inspired by?
I worked at a film lab and I worked the night shift, and that was for just a few months, but that was more of an inspiration, just the working that time of day where you just don't encounter as many people and it's sort of this lonely existence. That really inspired the movie. There wasn't really a specific diner that I drew from, it was more just that experience of working at night.
So how come you decided to go with the diner?
I think it just because of the look of like I wanted to reset the world. I didn't want to set it at a film lab, even though that was sort of where I was drawing from. But I thought of what's another place where people work at night and that's sort of visually interesting and has possibilities of different kinds of characters that can come and go, and a diner just felt like the right fit.
It's fairly unusual to depict sex without an obvious love story involved. Was this a conscious decision or was it just like something that grew from the making?
Yeah, I think that I think in a lot of times in these small town environments where people are working these hours and kind of living a life that they're sort of bored by, they kind of do a lot of things that just to kind of keep themselves entertained, or just they make choices for different reasons. And in this, the characters in this film, they're not really having sex because they're in love with each other. It's more like it's like to serve a purpose of, getting money or just wasting time, those kind of things. And I just thought that side of things wasn't shown very often, but from people I know in my life that it's common. So I just thought it would be interesting to sort of explore that side of things.
Yeah, and Francine is basically all surrounded by men except for another colleague at the diner. Do you think this affects her self-image, just being surrounded by men in her workplace and the customers? And
I do. I think, yeah, and I also think that sort of probably in her life she's gone in such a direction that it became that way, that she was surrounded by men, and that she's not seeking out female friends. And I think it's just kind of all comes back to how her self-worth and how she kind of evaluates her own worth to the opposite sex, and just so I think that it's gotten that way sort of on her own volition, but I don't. I also think it's this self-perpetuating thing where all of a sudden she's surrounded by men, and then she just keeps judging herself in their eyes and trying to measure up to what they want her to be. I think when people, I think just in life when people get into a comfortable routine, it's really hard to break away from that. And in this particular environment, people have been stuck in these routines for so many years that I think making a different choice all of a sudden feels really difficult. Like, whereas like at the beginning of a path, it's like you take one step off to one direction and it can send you way out in this other direction. But when you just keep going on the same path, it's a much bigger step to get to that same place that you might have wanted to go from the start. So I think the longer time that goes by, the more difficult it is for them to get to where they thought they wanted to be. So I think that's the challenge, that they have to just kind of overcome that fear of trying something different, new.
and there's a side story as well with Stu and his daughter. How come you decided to add a second main character? Why didn't you just focus on Francine?
Actually, at the beginning of the script writing phase, Stu was the main character, and then Francine came about, and she became the main character just because her story just kind of grew. But I thought it was, there's a lot. It's an ensemble, and there's a lot of different storylines going on, and those two are sort of the largest. But they sort of tear down slowly because the truck driver becomes a pretty central character, as well as the foster brother and all these other characters that surround Francine. But I thought that Stu's he represents one of the options, that if Francine keeps going in the same direction she's going, she could end up in in that life, you know. And so I think it was important to like represent these other places where, if she's looking around, what actually makes her leave eventually is looking at what her futures could be, you know, with the diner owner or the Serbian character who works at the diner as well. So just wanted to make sure that you know, showed that what might instigate her move, and really explored those other life choices too.
It's not really mentioned where the film sets. Did you have a specific place in mind, or did you just want it to be, you know, unmentioned so you can like apply it to where you might live if you live in a small town?
Right, yeah. I mean, I think I wanted to try to keep it universal as much as possible, but it's definitely got I think I live in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, and it was, you know, if I had to point to a place on the map for this film to have taken place, it would have been in central Washington. It's a town that doesn't really exist anywhere, but it kind of made up industrial town in the middle of Washington State. But I felt like it represented a lot of different types of communities all over at least the United States. I don't know about outside of that, but it was an intentional thing to not really name where they were. She does say Seattle, and she references Washington state cities, and so I think it sort of places it, but it's pretty general.
Do you have any upcoming projects?
I do. I just finished a film that I shot in Washington again, called Eden. It's a story about human trafficking. It's based on a true story, and so I'm just in post-production on that. And then I have another project that Lacey, my producer, one of the producers of The Off Hours, and I are trying to get made, called Sadie, which hopefully will be next year.
When is Eden premiering?
I don't know yet. We'll see. Hopefully sometime early 2012, but not sure time and place yet.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.